Space, the final frontier. To this day, our eyes drift from the soils of the earth to the stars above. In the 20th century, the space race was more than an ambitious scientific project for America. It was the extended hand carrying the flag of democracy against the Soviet Union in a time of international turmoil. Conflicts in Korea, Vietnam, and even between the borders of a divided Germany pitted different ideologies against each other as they battled for worldwide domination. This era of major space exploration was founded in the midst of the Cold War, a battle not of gunfire, but national mettle.
We're at the height of the Cold War. World War II has ended, as you know, and we've gone right into the Cold War. We explode atomic and hydrogen bombs, they do also, and now we're each trying to prove who can get to space first.
Upon the end of World War II, an iron curtain was cast on Europe. Even across seas, the communist threat was felt in American homes. Although the Cold War consisted of proxy wars in foreign countries, it also began the space race, a competition that led to improved Soviet-American relations, effectively leading to the end of the Cold War. With many German scientists captured, and the Soviet paranoia of a post-World War II invasion, the Soviet Union's first developments in rocket power were focused on the military, leading to the development of a new generation of weapons of mass destruction, such as intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, and of course, multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles, MIRVs. In 1953, the Soviet Union created the first ever ICBM, the R-7 Semyorka rocket. Meanwhile, the U.S. Air Force continued to test ICBMs for military purposes as well, primarily led by the Vanguard program. The space race was officially started on August 30th, 1955, when lead Soviet rocket scientist Sergei Korolev and the Soviet Academy of Sciences made it their focus to beat America in firing rockets into orbit. After 2 years of multiple rocket tests and failures, both America and the Soviet Union were close to launching a satellite into Earth's orbit. The Soviet space program feared that a satellite from America might be launched early October of 1957, so they chose to launch their most prominent satellite payload on October 4th, 1957. This satellite, now known as the Sputnik 1, was officially the first man-made satellite in orbit of Earth. Although scientifically vapid, Sputnik 1 was a massive achievement for all of mankind, instilling fear into the heart of Americans. The Soviet discovery of mid-World War II German rocket engineers on their side of Berlin gave the Soviet powers early resources to derive their military missiles and later their spaceborne rocket crafts from. Although the Soviet powers made ample strides in rocketeering and started the space race, America wasn't far behind. Wernher von Braun, a former Nazi rocket scientist, made large strides with the development of the PGM-11 Redstone in 1950, a short-range ballistic missile that led to the Atlas A in 1957, America's first operational ICBM.
In many ways, such as in education and in art, we began to focus or actually fixate on this. For instance, there's this big STEM movement and a movement to move spending in schools away from maybe social studies and art and things like this and focus on that. Because it was not only a missile gap they were talking about, or would talk about soon, but also a gap in scientists. But then if you look at a lot of the movies that came out of the time period, a lot of the movies were heroes and anti-heroes, good versus evil, and a lot of it dealing with space.
Theoretically, the Soviet Union now had the power to spy on America from above. Although this was a threat to national security, President Eisenhower knew that this meant that the Soviets couldn't argue against an American satellite above their borders. Eisenhower ordered a rush launch by the Vanguard program on December 5, 1957, only to lead to a failed launch. This launch failure, also known as Flopnik, placed all hope onto von Braun's team. On January 31, 1958, the Juno 1 successfully launched the Explorer 1 into orbit. The early era of the space race led to the National Aeronautics and Space Act, ensuring that contractual federal spending on space exploration could be non-military. This eventually led to the creation of NASA. As the space race continued, the finish line kept on moving further away. American scientists knew that the Soviet Union would send a man into space before them. Sure enough, on April 12, 1961, the Vostok 1 sent Yuri Gagarin into space for 108 minutes before re-entry and ejection.
We have a saying here when you're nervous about something that you have butterflies in the stomach or butterflies in the tummy. Can you really honestly say that you did not have any butterflies in the tummy before you started?
По-английски есть пословица, что если немножко так не по себе и беспокоишься, то в желудке прыгают бабочки. Можете ли вы заверить всех, что таких бабочек у вас в желудке не было?
Могу заверить.
Yes, I can assure you there were no butterflies, moths, or anything else in my stomach.
This feat wasn't attempted by America until May 5, 1961, when Alan Shepard flew into space on the Freedom 7. However, Shepard only flew a suborbital flight, as opposed to the Soviets' full orbital. The USA wouldn't accomplish this until John Glenn orbited the Earth in 1962 on the Atlas 6. After May 5th, the race was clearly headed for the moon. President Kennedy said on May 25, 1961, that
we choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Clearly he meant these words as he set his sights on the Apollo program. Meanwhile, the Union continued the Vostok family tree. As both nations advanced toward the moon, many worried that the advancements in space technology would lead to non-peaceful complications. But both the United States and the Soviet Union felt that this was to be addressed, and after talks with the UN, on January 27, 1967, the Treaty on Principles Governing the Activities of States in the Exploration and Use of Outer Space, including the Moon and other celestial bodies, limiting the use of space, the Moon, and other planets for means of peaceful means and not as weapons of mass destruction. The President's mandate created quite a stir in both the United States and the Soviet Union. Both nations began development of massive rockets with complex plans for safely and efficiently delivering men to the moon. NASA worked steadily on the Saturn rocket family and the Apollo program. The plan was to ferry 3 men to the moon in a spacecraft designed as the Command Service Module, which was docked on orbit to a lunar landing module. The Soviets, on the other hand, worked on developing their N-1L3 rocket system alongside adapted Soyuz capsules. Designed by Korolev, it called for a joint spaceship lander design similar to Saturn V, but only had room for 2 cosmonauts. Although it was designed to be slightly more powerful than the Saturn V, the development was sloppy and uncoordinated, and the N-1 exploded all 4 times it was launched. Given that its initial test flights were in 1965, and assuming that it had not blown up, the Soviets could have beaten America to the moon. However, due to the Soviets' lack of coordination, the N-1 project was a failure. On July 16, 1969, the Apollo project paid off when the crew of 3 men, Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Edwin Aldrin, flew off to the moon on the Saturn V rocket. After a 3-day flight and 2 more days to land and prepare for departure of the spacecraft, Neil Armstrong was the first man to step on the moon, uttering the words,
"It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind."
When they landed on the moon, and I was just a little kid at the time period, we actually stopped and along the side of the road because we knew what was going to happen, and they found some kind of dank bar, and they let us come in. All these little kids come in and sit, and we actually watched it happen live. It was just phenomenal, and I think in many ways it was the high point in our space exploration, and we're of course coming back again with what's going on today, but the time period that was the thing.
By July 24th, the spacecraft returned to Earth, landing down in the Pacific Ocean. It was this day that is considered to be the official end to the space race. Since the end of the Apollo program, both America and Russia have worked together along with other nations in the world to further the exploration of space and other planets. In July 1975, the United States and Soviet Union performed the first international docking maneuver in orbit, docking an Apollo Command Service module to a Soyuz capsule. This was the first time that the two nations worked together in space, and together they performed several experiments and exercises that could not have been done alone. America again worked with the Soviets in 1995, delivering the docking module to the Mir space station. These joint ventures helped to pave the way for peaceful cooperation between the two superpowers and built the foundation for peace. The most monumental undertaking between the two nations was the construction of the International Space Station from 1998 to 2010. Using both Soviet Proton rockets and the Space Shuttle, the station was assembled 278 kilometers, or 173 miles, above the surface of the Earth. At an estimated cost of 150 billion, the International Space Station is arguably the most expensive object ever built by any group in human history. This was only possible through the international cooperation fostered by the space race and the spirit of exploration it fostered. The International Space Station stands as a monument to the resolution of political differences and the spirit of international cooperation for the benefit of all mankind.
A lot of the stuff today with the privatization and even private companies leading the charge, even to the point of being able to land rather than crash into the ocean, it's just amazing. And that, along with electric cars, is the two things I'm looking forward to for the future.
Today, the world of spaceflight has been forged by the first pioneers. Modern private spaceflight companies, inspired by the accomplishments of the space race era explorers, now push the boundaries of accessibility and affordability in space. SpaceX, founded by PayPal creator and Tesla CEO Elon Musk, has recently experimented with landing and reusing orbital-class boosters, which could reduce costs by as much as 20%. Blue Origin, run by Amazon's Jeff Bezos, is also pursuing this technology. Other companies such as United Launch Alliance, a joint venture between Lockheed Martin and Boeing Defense, are experimenting with reusing the upper stages of rockets on orbit via orbital refueling and modular construction. Though modern governments seem to be less interested in space exploration now than in previous years, their actions have inspired others to continue to push the boundaries of spaceflight further than ever before. During the Cold War, perhaps the most tense and conflicted time in human history, America and the Soviet Union were locked in conflicts across the globe. However, the space raid portrayed the non-military side to war. It proved that international conflict could be expressed in ways other than violence, and that humanity could benefit from international cooperation amidst grave circumstances. Through the push for space supremacy, the Soviet Union and the United States simultaneously drew the world together and pushed the boundaries of human ingenuity, courage, and space.
A lot of the stuff today with the privatization and even private companies leading the charge, even to the point of being able to land rather than crash into the ocean, it's just amazing. And that, along with electric cars, is the two things I'm looking forward to for the future.